Hi, my name is Winsley, and welcome to this week's Beginner's Guide. Today we're going to be talking about summoning units in Age of Wonders Planetfall, and we're joined by Orangelex44. Welcome back, Orange.
Moaning.
How are you doing?
I'm good. It's been a good week, a good weekend. I was on vacation for a week or a little over, so that's why I couldn't jump in any of these. But I'm excited. This is actually a fun topic, I think.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you back for this one. I think that this is definitely something we can talk a lot about, and yeah, I missed having you around. It was me, Sin Sling, and Ninja. We were bouncing between the three, and it'll be cool to get another two-person one going sometime soon. Maybe when we talk more about our favorite units, that'd be a good one to go into a lot of detail. But in this video, we're going to be basically talking about four things. We're going to be going over what are summons and why do you want to use them. Then we'll talk about the tactical summons that are in game. And after that, we'll go over the strategic summons. You can either summon units in the middle of combat, or you can summon them on this layer, the strategic layer, which is pretty useful in general. Both of them are quite useful. And the last thing we'll go over is just a couple other things that you can use to summon units. I mean, that's if we have time. We may end up spending the next hour just talking about the first three sections that we have planned here. So yeah, what are summons and why do you want to do them? Well,
Uh,
you can go
yeah,
ahead. Go for it.
sure. So I mean, I don't think anyone really debates what a summon is. um, that now there is a lot of ways to get them in the game. Again, as you said, both in the tactical layer and the strategic layer. Um, Most summons cost you some sort of operation points, whether that's your strategic operation points or tactical operation points. There's certainly a few units that also give them to you as well. But usually I figure that any advantage or disadvantage from the summon is kind of baked into the ability of the unit. So I don't want to get in too much detail on those again, unless we have time at the very end to talk about that. So focusing more on just the tactical and strategic summons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not every race in Secret Tech has access to it. It's certainly a bigger advantage for some races than others, and Secret Techs than others. Something like Xenoplague, I mean, in theory, is entirely built around summons, although their mechanic is, again, a different cost. um, you can pay either strategic points or tactical points to get summons from those guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a bit
Um,
tricky um, to get pustules in the beginning of the game because you have to like use the infection mechanic to get those guys to spawn in. It's kind of like a strategic summon, but you don't really you have less control over where it happens unless you really understand the way it tracks the number of infections.
yeah, and for me as kind of multiplayer, the way I'm approaching summons, um, there's kind of a couple different factors at play, right? First off is what am I paying to get them? And the big advantage of summons, as just a general statement, is that they are giving you units that you don't have to use city production to get. Um, for 90% whatever it is of the units in the game, you build them from a city. You can mod them up later, whatever. That's not important for this discussion, but you need to spend time and hammers to get the unit.
Mm-hmm.
Summons lets you bypass that. You're still almost always spending energy, maybe at a premium, maybe not at a premium. Some of that balance has changed over time in the game. Um, but instead of having to spend hammers, you can be using your operation points, either tactical or strategic. This is very good,
Mm-hmm.
especially for rush builds. Summons are a huge driver to most of the proper rushes in the game, just because it lets you absolutely maximize the number of units you can bring to any fight.
Yeah. So like if you lose one in a stack that you've got off in the middle of nowhere clearing off things, you can like summon
Yup.
in
it lets you spend something that's not production, and I'm glad you brought that up because that reminds me, the other thing it lets you do is save time.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, a big part of rushes is not always just so much how many units do you have, but where are those units, right? They have
Yeah.
to get to your opponent in time to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're planning, say, a turn 20 or earlier rush, not only do you need all the units to beat your opponent before that time frame, but you have to budget in anywhere from 3 to 6 turns just to walk them to get there.
Yeah.
And summons let you cut all that time out, which is a big deal. Now that's balanced a little bit in Planetfall specifically because of modding considerations,
Mm-hmm.
where you have to get the units, but you can make them more powerful as you're walking them over. And summon units always come in without any mods whatsoever. Sometimes you can mod them if they're strategic, but if they're tactical, you can't.
Right.
So that's kind of the first consideration when it comes to just summons as a general rule of thumb is what are you paying to get them? Most of the time, it's going to be some sort of tactile points or strategic points. Again, we'll talk about units maybe at the end. There's some other considerations there,
Yeah.
and Xenoplague. We'll talk about them too. The other thing to talk about is what is the benefit you're getting from summons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anything that ends up on the strategic map is just going to be better than anything that's limited to just the tactical map, right? So there's a slew of operations, and also we're talking about some of the per unit ones as well, where it's only in it for that one fight,
Yeah.
which isn't bad, right? That's very good. You can tilt a fight massively by putting the right unit in the right place.
Yeah, like this
But
one, the Valkyrie. He's really good, right? But you only get
yeah,
it one
it's a good
fight.
unit.
It doesn't get mods. It doesn't get experience. So
It's it's a little overstated for its claims to be a T2, but as far as its actual use case ability, it's probably a little above that. But again, that's one specific case. We can drill into the specifics a little later.
mm-hmm.
Really what I want to get at from the multiplayer perspective is the strategic ones are what's opening up for rushes. Which again, that's really the big focus you're going to get with these strategic summons. Not that they're bad later on in the game, but to really be optimized with them, it's to kill things quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to do that is to get a unit that sticks around. The tactile ones are more going to be, I need to win this one fight.
Yeah.
Is this the appropriate tool to win this one fight? Which, that's hard to say.
Yeah, like
Because you're competing with a lot of other stuff then too, right? You're competing with your nuke operations, healing operations, what have you.
I think this is a
Um,
good example of why you'd want to use the tactical summons, because like I can't get any more stacks into this combat, right?
Yeah, like it comes into play a lot of times when you really just want more actions, period. It comes into play if you've made your build around kind of more unit summon stuff, right? To where you just want to have a bunch of stuff. If you're outnumbered, or if you have, in multiplayer again, it can come up where you might not be expecting to win this fight, but you really want to wear the opponent down, and so you just need ways to keep grinding it out. And sometimes if you really just want, well, yeah, again, as I said, that's more of the per fight decision judgment, as opposed to things that show up on the strategic side are your long-term planning judgments.
Mm-hmm. One more thing I wanted to mention was from the stream yesterday in our multiplayer. I think it was Mr. No brought up basically if you can summon, that means that you won't need to make as many cities. You won't need to make a colony that's dedicated to producing units, which means
Yep.
you'll have more Cosmite in the short term, which means more early game mods, and that just makes fighting a lot easier if you have those mods in the units. So a lot of the time in the early game, you have to weigh the benefits of spending the Cosmite on this colonizer or making your units a little bit better. And most of the time, people
it
go for
really is just an
colonizers.
optimizing thing where if you're really rushing to be as quick as possible, deciding whether or not to build one colonizer or two colonizers is actually a massive decision.
Mm-hmm.
And for builds that have access to strategic summons, you're not as incentivized to have to go for that extra city because you're not as concerned about pure production. That's really the limiter in rushing, is how many hammers can you get out at once.
Yeah.
Because again, not only do you have to build the units, they have to walk over. So to be at the opponent by turn, between turns 15 and 20, you really need to have all of your stuff built by turn 10 to 12. Which is very difficult to do when you have to plan out, okay, I also need to shove a couple cities in there. And it just turns out that if you can offload one of those production queues into a summoning queue, it makes things become a lot, I don't want to say simpler, but more reasonable to accomplish.
Yeah. I definitely noticed a big difference in the battles and how, in terms of how hard they were when I started using summons. One of my favorite things about the strategic summons, or not strategic, the tactical summons, is you can put that unit that you summon in behind the enemy line, and if it's like a sentinel, it's gonna have extra evasion because it's flying, and you might be able to kill off a unit and then draw a bunch of enemy fire, which is pretty massive if you can keep those units that attacked your summon far away from the majority of your forces, or kind of like split off like half of the enemy force, so that you can fight half of the enemy force with all of your other units, and just let the other half kill off the little summon.
Yeah, and actually that's a good transition. You can probably start this fight as we start going off into the tactical units themselves, and the use cases for them. But you're right. One of the great advantages of a tactical summon, again, it won't stick around, but to win one specific fight, is positioning. It's a unit you can put exactly where you need it to be, which is really the strongest part of it. If all you wanted to do was to kill a unit, it's almost always way more cost effective to use one of the cheap nukes, right? Most of the T1 weapon trees have something that you can just blow a person up with a nice op. And that's very powerful. That is, most of the time the thing you want to use your operation points for. The reason you would switch and try to do a summon that sticks around is because you want that long-term positioning effects. You want to force your opponent to have to address a threat in the back line. You maybe want that longer term value. And the other main reason that, in my opinion, you would use a tactical summon is the smaller fights, right? This isn't 18 versus 18, but it's a big fight, right? There's a lot of units involved. Adding one more unit to either side isn't a huge deal because it's only 3 actions. If you're starting with, say, 30 actions on one side, 30 on the other side, getting 3 more isn't tilting you too much. But if you only have 6 units on each side, getting a 7th unit is relatively a much bigger advantage than it would be otherwise. So that's really where I think they're mostly optimized for most of the tactical summons, is to get big advantages in smaller fights, or if your opponent is using some sort of build that is really prioritizing, the backline stuff stays in the backline, frontline stuff stays in the front line, and you just want to disrupt that. So things like snipers, right? Especially if you don't always have a consistent way to stagger the snipers out, just throwing something in the backline that forces them to have to reposition a little bit and maybe make suboptimal plays can have a disproportionate advantage to you.
Right. One thing that I'm just thinking of now is if you don't have to build as many units, you don't have to have as much production, and you can get more things like energy exploitations, which will allow you to have much more flexibility. You don't have to summon with energy. You could maybe use like a damage operation or something along those lines.
And they feed into each other as well, because your strategic points and your tactical points go up with the same tech. So once you start feeding towards summons for the purpose of either one, you're just going to have more points to spend on both. Now, there's not a ton of builds that have a lot of strategic summons and tactical summons, but there's some. Again,
Yes.
Devour is one where they do have access to a strategic summon or to a tactical summon. It's not the best one, but it's okay.
Yeah, the Sapper's okay. I mean, it's not my favorite. Sentinel is probably my favorite.
I think the real golden standard, if you're talking just summons in general, is the Vanguard. They have not one but 2 tactical summons, both of which are pretty good. And then they have the support tactical summons, which again are kind of a different discussion right there.
Yeah. So for the
Anyways,
Vanguard summons, should I like get a Vanguard commander up to show off where they are in the trees, or just kind of pull up the skills?
I don't know if you wanted to actually play out this fight. I don't think we have to, but
No.
sure. Let's if you want to go through unit by unit, we can do that. I don't know if you'd rather talk about all the tactical ones and all the strategic ones, or if you'd rather kind of go race by race.
Yeah.
It's
So
up to you.
what I'm thinking right now is what I want to do is compare all the tactical ones to
Sure.
each other, because I think that it will be very easily to get confused and mistake a tactical thing for a strategic thing if we bounce around too much. So
Sure.
um,
Yeah, in that case, we looked at Devour. They have the I've immediately forgotten the name, but the Sapper,
yeah.
which I need to double check the tech outside the game here.
It's pretty
Don't
quick. It gives
remember
me a
the
second
Sapper.
to.
It does a thing when it comes in, right? Because not all of the tactical summons do.
Oh, I didn't see
think
that. I can pull it up.
creates cover when it shows up, right? Something like that.
I'll
Or
pull
am
it
I
up in
forgetting?
a
I don't
second.
use that one very often, so I don't remember. I don't play a bunch of Devour.
I'll be able to get the
But
Imperial
that is the
Archives
other
in like 5
consideration is
seconds.
some tactical summons, most, not all, do something the turn they show up. Not all of them do.
You know, I didn't actually notice that it does stuff, but this unit is...
Maybe not. It comes in with actions.
Yeah.
But the Sapper, it's not bad. It's the Devour just don't really need a unit like that as much. Really, their game plan is often kind of more defensive focused, anyways, so they don't always have to disrupt as much.
Whatever brings in the bloated pustule, that guy does damage when he's summoned in.
Yes.
He does a
So the
stagger
bloated
with
pustule
damage.
does damage when it comes in. The Valkyrie does damage when it comes in. The Constrictor doesn't explicitly do damage, but it's a soft kind of because it comes in with its actions, it can be a soft disable right away. The Sapper, I think it's got like a mobility option or something, right?
Yeah, it's pretty. It's got like 40 movement points, I think, if that's what you mean.
What?
The
For
Sapper?
the Constrictor or the Sapper? Oh, the Sapper has the tunnel ability, right?
Maybe. I don't think... Actually, yes, it has Assault Tunnel. It's not the other tunnel.
And then Seismic Charge, is that a...
Stagger.
Stagger? It's a AoE stagger. Oh, it's a massive impact. Okay.
Does
So
2 hexes away. Yeah.
That's the
Good
reason
stagger
you're going to
lot.
want to bring that in, is to pop that right away, do that AoE stagger, which isn't bad. That's really disruptive against the right builds. But it's not super valuable against all builds, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. And that one is the Deploy Sapper is a tier 5 tech.
Yeah,
That would be
tiers
like...
matter. Tech tiers matter a lot, and it also matters what else your build is going for. I don't want to keep swapping you around, but I'll just kind of mention that for the Devour,
tier 5.
Tier 5 is not super hard for them to get, but they're not getting a lot of other stuff from that tech. You get the vehicle for the heroes, which you don't really need, and then Reconstruction Kit, which is a resummon mechanical units. That's not really helpful early on in the game. You've got better techs to go for, which is really the reason why you don't see the Sapper. It's not a terrible unit. It's just an awkward position in the tech tree. So you aren't gonna... Construction Kit's the ability name. The mod itself is Reconstruction Kit. But
I'm bad
anyways,
at spelling.
that's not... Yeah, don't worry about it.
Exactly, it's not important. I think it is important to note that the Trencher is tier 2, I believe. The Deploy Trencher is super early on, so you can start
Trencher is super
spamming
early
that.
on. It is, well, again, if we don't want to get into too much detail with strategic summons, Deploy Trencher comes online really early. Most of the strategic summons come online pretty early. with one exception, they're all kind of in a position that you can make a build around any one of them if you want, because they come early enough to be reliable.
Yeah, I
The
totally said
tactical
I
summons
didn't.
tend to fit in that tier 4, tier 5 range. There's a
Yeah.
couple that are a little more, a couple that are a little less, but that's where most of them are sitting. Depending on the specific race, it can really switch around. Some races only have to get 2 techs to get that Faust. Some races need 3. That's a big difference as far as tech investment.
Mm-hmm.
And they're sitting in the mod line for the racial ones, which that can be a little hard to maneuver around as well, because a lot of the mod lines, the racial mod lines, are built in a way that you get a couple early mods in the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 layer that are universally applicable, that are just really solid value mods. Once you start hitting tier 4, tier 5, tier 6, tier 7, that's when you start to get to the most specialized stuff that you're probably aiming for something specific if you go there.
Yeah, like
The
this
tactical
one.
summons tend not to be strong enough to explicitly research just to get that summon. You're getting it because you're getting the mod, and then the tactical summon just comes along with it.
Yeah, jetpacks are amazing. Whereas like the launcher turret pack, it can only go on your Vanguard engineers, which can be nice if you want to like reset those engineers with pugs. It's not a strategy I'm very familiar with, but in my mind it makes sense.
Launcher turrets are extremely powerful, but again, as you said, you need to be using an engineer build to get that, which means you tend not to see that launcher turret summon because people won't go for that. Whereas the jetpack, it's also an early attack, which helps, but the jetpack has just enough random odds and sods that it's really good on, especially in the early game,
Yeah.
that it's pretty reasonable you're going to just want the jetpack for any build, and then you get the summon access to it. So that's one of the reasons you see Valkyrie in multiplayer a lot more, is just because you'll already have had it for the mod.
Yeah, the fact that it's a free action and that you can like fly a melee unit next to a target and get a lot of damage is massive, and also you can fly like a ranged unit to a perfect position to shoot. Yeah,
it's a flagship mod for the Vanguard. It's absolutely a build around. It's a build around, but it's also one of those mods that you can just research just to have it for the utility of it, and then throw it on a bunch of random stuff. But coming back to topic.
Yes.
The Vanguard have 2 dedicated tactical operation summons. They have the Valkyrie, which is a little earlier, and then the heavy launcher turret. Can you double check heavy launcher? Okay, so heavy launcher turret doesn't do anything when it comes in, but it's kind of a long range artillery on demand summon, which is very powerful. But it's paired with the launcher turret mod, which means that you're almost never going to get that except for a dedicated engineer build, in which case you don't need it because your engineers bring the artillery. Or you're going to get it as a luxury tech once you've already got whatever else you want online. So you tend not to see that. Deploy Valkyrie, on the other hand, it does something right away when it comes in. It has that high impact AoE, plus it creates cover, which is not always useful, or not even often useful, but situationally can be cool. And then the Valkyrie itself is a very interesting unit. It gives you melee on demand, which is something that Vanguard can kind of struggle with. One individual melee unit is not often that great, but the Valkyrie has a lot of mobility. It was a totally disposable unit because you got it for, well, not for free, but you didn't bring it to the fight. You won't have any Cosmite invested into it.
Yeah.
So you can play pretty fast and loose with it, which is nice on a melee unit. You always have to assume they're going to die in any fight you bring them. Oh, some of them. So I really see the Vanguard as kind of the, not just for tactical summons, but summons in general. They're the golden standard. Valkyrie is a big part of that. It's just a very powerful, flexible thing. Plus, it's on a tech that is easy to access, so you will see it.
Right. So
Now,
that's Vanguard. Should we move on?
Well, I want to think Secret Tech, since we have Void Tech pulled up. I don't think Void has any.
Put Create Phase
summons.
Echo in here because it creates something that's a bit like a summon. It works pretty
Sure.
similar.
There's a couple big downsides from that versus a standard summon. I'm not even considering the less damage or whatever, but the big one is it doesn't go where you want it. It appears adjacent to the unit, so you can't play that positioning game. However, it lets you copy anything. Well, not a hero.
Yeah.
It's one of those ops that is a little weaker in the early game. It gets stronger the longer the game goes on because
Yeah.
your targets get better. But in those big 18 versus 18 fights that you tend to see in multiplayer, the fight typically will happen before this becomes very useful, and not being able to position is really painful, and it's just a way better op in a smaller fight than in a bigger fight. Like where this shines is maybe like knocking over a landmark, where there's some really high value stuff that you can target. Well, wait, this can target opposing units, right? Yeah, I think it can. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'm mistaken. I never see this because it's also it's in dimensional control, right? So it's off the main line.
It's in the bottom one.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see it very often.
I think
if you can target opposing units with it, that does make it a lot better, but it is by definition worse than the unit it's copying. And at 6 op points, that's just a little pricey for the value you're getting for it.
if I had to guess, I think it would be only yours. I guess it wouldn't be that hard for me actually to go in here and just test that, huh?
Did you do the alt tech? You did alt tech,
Yeah,
right?
I got alt tech
You have all op
unlocked.
points?
I hope so.
Do you have? Okay, you have 75 energy, so yeah,
Yeah.
we can test it real quick.
It's worth checking out. Just need to give
It's
it a turn.
okay. I don't see it very often, obviously, because I don't know immediately what it does.
I think if you
But,
want to tank or do something other than deal damage, it can help out in that regard because it only reduces the amount of damage that you do by 50%.
Sure, but you're Void Tech. You have Echo Walkers, so you've got better options to do that with.
I had no idea you could do it like that. And I know I play Void Tech quite a bit. Know a lot about them, so that's really cool. It's worth going over.
That's kind of the other thing with it is Void Tech just has better tools. In Void Tech specifically, it's a low value compared to what other tools it has, but it exists. That's good to know.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, I think we can move on. So we talked about Devour, talked about Void Tech.
Maybe Assembly Constrictor. You've mentioned him, but we didn't go over it too much.
Let's at least pull up the Constrictor specifically. So Assembly only get the one tactical summon, just the Constrictor. And as I said before, the advantage of it is it's a soft disable with project constriction field.
Pretty awesome. What does break free mean? Do you know? Like, is there?
I think there's. I've had this question asked before. I'm not the assembly main. This would be Ninja's purview. I think if it gets staggered, it gets released, and if there might be like a per turn check or something as well that the target can attempt to remove the constriction. So really, it's helpful for one round. You can't depend on it for more than that. Now it is pretty tanky at 45 and 5, 5 defensive stats. It's okay. If you looked at the tech tree, which again, don't bother to pull it up. I can do it out of game here, but to play Constrictor, it's only at tier 4, but it comes in with adoptive systems, which the other stuff is cloaking implants, and then that supercharged tactical operation for specific units. Cloaking implants is another one of those. It's okay, it's a good mod, but it's not a put on everything mod. It just tends to be in an awkward position for the assembly to tech into. That being said, if there's any race that can afford to just get random techs because they want to, it's assembly. so it does pop up from time to time. It's not one of the best tactical operations in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it
It's got
has
its
its uses,
place.
but really, with these tactical summons, it needs to be a little more than just okay in order for it to consistently see use.
With only
Um,
45 energy, I think it is one of the cheaper ones, and those
I think
defensive
you are
values
correct.
are,
At
yeah.
345, that's a little low compared to what you're getting with what you're paying for a lot of the other ones. Like if you looked at Valkyrie, I believe that's probably 460.
Mm-hmm. I can get that up pretty easily.
Oh no, never
Ooh,
mind.
maybe they
Yeah,
made them
then
cheaper.
uh, there was a lot of recosting in Tyrannosaurus,
Mm-hmm.
so I think a lot of these tactical summons were not ones that didn't get cheaper. So as in just the general run of everything getting cheaper, these guys got so too.
One thing I just saw is this guy can actually be summoned on water, whereas I was noticing earlier Valkyries and the turret they can't go on water.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's kind of nice. Okay, so we could talk about maybe the Abyssinians next. How do you feel about those guys?
Oh, for Kyoko?
Yeah, Kirko's guys.
Um, don't see them too often. I gotta pull up the tech tree again. That one is almost wholly because of tech tree. That one's at T5 with
Mm-hmm.
3 mods or 3 techs in front of it. So it's just very expensive to get to. It comes in with adaptive carapace and tunneling claws, which are both decent. Well, tunneling claws is pretty situational, but
Yeah.
adaptive carapace is an excellent mod, but you can get regen a lot earlier with a lot less investment. That's almost as good. Um, you're not really going to see deploy Abyssian as the tackle operation all that much unless someone is specifically going deep into the Kyoko mods for some reason.
I mean,
It's just a little too hard to get to.
I use this
Um,
unit to encase units that I'm a little bit scared of. I might like put it behind a
oh, yeah,
one of
if
those
when
things
you
that
see
throws
them,
rocks, the tier threes.
the Abyssian is a very good unit. It's actually the I believe it's the vehicle you get for the Kyoko.
Mm-hmm.
If you pick their assault vehicle at the beginning of the game, I think is an Abyssian.
Yeah, and there's a build to
Um,
solo with that, I think.
yeah, it's just a very nice utility unit. I think the Abyssian itself is very good. Um, that one you just don't see solely because of where it lies in the tech tree.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't come in at a position where it's going to be super high impact anymore by the time you tech it. If it was a couple techs earlier, it would be a different story. Um, but it is worth casting once you have it.
Yeah, because you can like
Um,
encase something and then draw a bunch of fire onto your Abyssinian. I mean that works
sure.
decently well too. He doesn't have quite as much defense, but that's okay.
So that's Assembly, Devour, Kyoko, Vanguard. We're not really doing in order here.
No, it's fine. Shirkan, we
Shirkan
couldn't see any,
don't
right?
have one, so we can skip them pretty comfortably.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe mention that they do have the ability to call in units, but it's through
yes,
hero skills.
they have a hero poke, which might be just the highest value one in the game because comes on pretty early. It's only like I think a T3 or T4 poke. You don't need to have a ton of levels to get it.
Mm-hmm.
The sleeper agent itself doesn't. It's not as high impact as some of the other tactical summons are, but considering that you can put it on all of your heroes, and unlike some of the other units that are built around having a summon, they're giving something up. Heroes aren't getting it; it's just free. So,
Mm-hmm.
it is an excellent ability, even if it's not really working under the same rules as the other tactical summons we've talked about.
Yeah, it's similar but different. But we could talk a little bit about the Sentinel. I mean, I've already done that quite a
Yep.
bit, but I'll bring him up.
So for Syndicate, deploy Sentinel again. That one I don't see very often, and that's almost exclusively because of tech tree reasons. It's a TIFO tech, which would be okay, but it's paired with the spatial acceleration sails, which is the Mirage only or the Mirage
Mm-hmm.
exclusive mod.
Yeah.
Um,
And I know a lot of
so you're
people
never
aren't
getting
giant
that
fans of
tech unless you
Mirages.
want something. Yeah, unless you want Mirages, in which case the Sentinel is okay, but not super helpful in those fights. Or you're going a lot deeper down the tech tree, for something well past that tech.
I mean,
Um,
he's got 4 shields. He's flying, which means, you know, you're not really going to get around those shields very easily, especially since you can summon it where you want.
yep.
And if he survives 1 round of combat, he can use AoE here. So
So
that's
the
pretty
the
good.
Sentinel is one that he's kind of trading that immediate tone you summon utility in exchange for just being a much bigger pain in the ass
Mm-hmm.
through the entire fight. As you said, a high defense stat flyer. Um,
Yeah, you
the
can
Overwatch isn't a
use
huge,
this.
huge deal most of the time, but it's actually just got decent damage on a flyer, which is hard to get, and getting that as just a summon is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
But
I used this in that dev match thing that we were in. And I remember Abrax was like, "That's the best summon in the game." I didn't know you had unlocked that already. And I was like, "Well, yep, I
I,
have some decent
I did,
stuff here."
yeah, from my perspective, I wouldn't say the Sentinel's the best summon in the game. It's a good one, like it's in there, but I'm actually trying to think of what I would consider the best tactical summon. Oh yeah, I know what it will be. We'll talk about it with Xenoplague.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's fine. Again, it's one of those long drag out ones, so it's going to be really good in those 6v6s because it's just an excellent unit throughout the entire fight for
Yeah,
those longer fights.
you can keep pressure
Um,
off of your guild assassins, and they can just shoot from far away if you want. I've
yeah,
definitely done that.
it doesn't need to be summoned in the back line to be effective. You can summon it in your back line and just use it as a long range, hard to kill, shoot with stuff.
I think yeah, that pulse cannon is cooldown to 1, so you can use that pretty often.
Yeah, it's kind of like a T2 artillery, which the only other unit comparable to that that's easily accessible is the Deadeye.
Oh yeah, the
So
Shirkan Deadeye.
yeah. Anyways, so that's for Syndicate. That just leaves us Assembly as far as the races.
We talked assembly. We did constructors. Amazon.
Amazon.
Yeah, luring.
Sorry.
Another one. After a while, I was like, he knows what he's trying to say.
And Amazon are interesting in that they have technically a lot of tactical summons. They just are all kind of these passive pylons.
Mm-hmm.
Vanguard have one of these or a similar one as well. The Vanguard have their so tier 1 or tier 2 tech. They get one that applies obscured and some other defense stat stuff.
Yeah.
I don't traditionally consider those kind of in the same ballpark because they're really more like a defensive AoE buff that the opponent can address if he wants to. But specifically the one here that's interesting to talk about as a tactical summon is the luring field pylon, where it really is taking a lot of the discussion that we've talked about and ramping up the benefits and ramping up the downsides. Luring field pylon will win you a small 6v6 fight, and it will absolutely destroy the AI, because it's just the return on your investment over a longer fight is massive. But in any one turn, it's not giving you a ton of boost, right? You're getting a random T2 animal. I can't remember if you get the Amazon buff on it or not, but even if you do, an unmodded T2 melee unit that by definition is going to be way in your backline because you want the pylon to live.
Mm-hmm.
That means that the turn you summon this, it does nothing for you. And the turn after you summon it, it also probably does nothing for you.
Mm-hmm.
The turn after that is when you finally start getting something, and what you've got is just an unmodded, unleveled melee, almost certainly melee unit.
Mm-hmm. But that can be good if you're fighting something that has no
Yep.
armor, and tons of shields, which the
But
Voidbringers
it
are
takes so
that.
long for it to help you. It's just it's damning in a multiplayer circumstance,
Hmm.
and it's attached to this pylon, which if your opponent thinks it's going to be a problem, he'll find a way to kill.
Yeah, it's got 5 shields and 50 HP, but if you get close, you can
It's
melee that
decently
down
chunky,
really
but
quick.
if you put it in any position that you know it can't die, that also means you're putting it in a position that the units it's giving you are going to take a long time to help. And if you kind of go back and look at a lot of these multiplayer fights, either ones that I've posted, ones that you've posted, that stream, or or any fight really, even
Hmm.
against AI, they're over in 4 or 5 turns of combat, right?
Yeah.
So luring field pylon is just not going to really help unless you're able to cheese it a little bit, which usually means you're fighting against the AI. Again, if you are in some situation that it's maybe your opponent's trying to snipe one of your lesser defended cities with a bunch of scouts, dropping this on turn 1 might do it for you, but then you run into a lot of scouts of flying, so
Yeah.
so even that use case isn't always super helpful. It's interesting. I like that it's in the game. I just don't think that it's in the same usability tier. It's just too niche of a
Hmm.
use case to be properly effective. And that's why I don't really consider the Amazons to be kind of a tactical summon focused race.
They
They
have the
just don't
nice.
have that immediate impact.
They have this hero skill, Call of the Wild, which calls in a random wildlife unit, and that's basically the same as the luring thing. But
It's
yeah, it's
the
not a hero.
downside of that versus the Shikaran Call Insider. And I said Call Insider might be the best poke in the game.
Hmm.
Call Insider comes way, way earlier than Call of the Wild.
Yeah.
Call of the Wild is like you need to be level 7 or 8 or 9 or something like that, as opposed to level 3 or whatever it is for the Shikaran one.
Hmm.
Um, and that's just such a bigger, such a much more massive investment. Now, Call Insider, I think Call Insider might be a once per battle, whereas Call of the Wild's on a cooldown. But
Yeah.
either way, it just takes too long.
That would make
So
sense if they give it to you later that you can use it more times.
yeah.
I'll pull up Amazons and maybe Xenoplague so we can talk a little bit about the thing you
Well,
like
yeah.
from
Let me double
Xenoplague.
check. Are there any other race, but not race, secret tech specific ones that matter? So, I will at least say in passing, there's a couple tactical operations that say if the unit gets this inflict or if this unit dies, you then will get something summoned from it.
Hmm.
The Herald have one with drained, although that isn't actually going to help you in that tactical fight. Um,
There's
those
Cynumbra.
exist, but usually your advantage from them, those tend to be a tactical op that's giving you the strategic benefit later. They're not necessarily going to really help you win your fight you're in right now.
You were right about Call of the Wild being on a cooldown. Yeah,
Oh,
you can
level
use it.
12.
It's really
So
late game stuff.
that's
Yeah.
why. That's why Call of the Wild is I don't want to say bad. Like it's fine once you get it, but man, it's just so slow.
I'd say it's probably more for single player games where you can level up your guys without worrying about people rushing you down or something like that.
It, again, it's okay if you've got your hero farmed up, but it's hard to have that be a consistent thing, and the payoff at that point is a lot more in line with what you'd expect
Hmm.
other races hero pokes to give you.
Right.
But let's talk Xeno. And
Bloated
I will at
pustules
least
in
suggest
you.
that Xeno is like the secret tech that's built around summoning, mostly from the free spawn tactical end of it, but they do have what I consider to be the best tactical summon in the game as well, in Summon Bloated Pustule, which is
Hmm.
at T2.
It's
Oh,
T2.
T3 maybe. It's their second tech, Dispersion,
I can't see it right now.
at the very bottom
Ah,
on the left.
there, my
Drop
eyes.
spell pod.
They're no
Um,
longer failing me.
and Drop Spell Pod, it's interesting because the unit itself will almost never actually deal damage. But What makes this operation really good is it actually does a decent chunk of damage combined with high impact the turn it comes in.
Hmm.
So as just as a damage operation, it's okay for 32.
Yeah.
30 energy, 2 points. It's not great, but it's okay. However, the bloated pustule itself, because it has that explosion on death,
Hmm.
it means that you dropped this bloated pustule in a big chunk of units by definition, right? Because you wanted to get that damage out.
Yeah.
Now those units all have to scatter. So if your opponent is, maybe they're a bunch of snipers, or they're maybe Vanguard with a bunch of troopers or something, they have to spend effort to scatter, and then they also have to spend actions to kill the unit. It's a very easy unit to kill, but they still probably have to spend 1 or 2 units worth of effort to deal with it. Maybe even more than that, depending on how the actual fight's playing out, how much stagger you got in.
It's a good point.
So
I
yeah,
actually hadn't
the
thought about
operation
that.
is just very cost effective for what it forces your opponent to have to deal with.
It's nice that this thing comes with small target and skitter, so if it does survive.
Well, but if it does survive, skitter is useless on this unit, because if it does survive, your plan is to blow it up.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
burst kills it.
Yeah, because that's the only way it does damage.
Yeah. So skitter isn't a big deal on it. I mean, I
Okay.
guess there's some Overwatch in these. Anyways, before I keep distracting myself, really, small target is helpful though, because again, that it means that even at just being 25 with no defense stats, it can be deceptively hard to just kill this little guy.
Hmm.
um, yeah. So that's why I think this is, just from a pure cost effectiveness standpoint, bloated pustule, or whatever, drop spore pod is the name of the summon, is just very, very good.
Yes.
But in an entirely different way from a lot of the racial tactical summons.
There's another thing that summons in units. I think it was late game. Is it this one? Yes. Xenobonic Plague Bomb. It spawns in 2 Xenoplague pustules near a colony. I've never
Yeah,
used it.
so
That's
that's
pretty late.
strategic.
Oh yeah, that's strategic. My bad. That's
Yeah.
not this. I didn't have that in my notes.
But it does let me talk about, there's another kind of type of operation we've not addressed at all that is a tactical, like, you're paying strategic points for a tactical benefit, which is, there's a couple city defense strategic operations that will give you summons either at the beginning of the fight, or maybe there's one that's a couple summons throughout the fight. I don't remember.
I didn't throw those in my notes. I just felt like that
Vanguard
was
have
adding too
one with
much.
drones. There's Shikaun might have one.
I know Void Tech
I don't
has
remember those off the top of my head, but
something rather.
those you'll see from time to time. They're okay. They tend to be pretty wildly overpriced. And some of those city defense things you just don't see a ton of in multiplayer anyways. There's a couple that are game breaking, but they exist, just to mention that, of my little cheat sheet in the side here, where I say, what are you paying tactical points or strategic points, and what's it giving you between tactical benefit and strategic benefit?
Mm-hmm.
All of that combines. You can spend strategic points for tactical benefit, tactical points for strategic benefit, tactical for tactical, strategy for strategy. They cover the whole range.
Yeah, these guys
somehow.
got it all. It's nice.
So again, Xeno. Hopefully, we'll still talk about strategic stuff a little bit later.
Yes.
Are there any other secret techs that have a notable? Again, Heriter has the deal damage, and it can come back as a drained, but that's not in that same fight, I don't think.
Forget how you get the.
Oh no, it is that
echo.
same. It is that same fight. It kind of helps, but you're doing that to get the drained for forever, not for the fight that you're playing it in.
Mm-hmm. This guy's a summon. I just forget the name of the operation that gives you that, right?
Oh, yeah, but and actually, that's a strategic one, and you actually mean the whisper. The echo is when the unit dies, it comes back as an echo. Whisper of Discord is the strategic summon.
Yep, got that backwards in my notes.
Not tactical. I think that's just about it. We may have forgotten one. Again, no, we talked about tech. Right? Oh, Synthesis have a mod. It's the
Mm-hmm.
end game mod.
Malware thingy.
Deploy malware daemon. That's, I mean, that's a tier 9 tech.
It's pretty good.
So I don't think I've ever seen anybody use that, especially when you have total network integration at T6. That's just
Mm-hmm.
a much more flexible, debatably more powerful mod in the first place. So yeah, that one you just don't see at
There was
all.
one more thing in
Um,
my notes here for Sinumbra: sacrifice to the abyss, whatever that is.
oh yeah, that good call on that one. Um, again, it's not one you'll see in multiplayer because it comes in so late,
Mm-hmm.
but it is a way to get a T4 unit in the battlefield as
Yeah,
a tactical summon.
pretty special.
Um, and it is actually paired. It's paired with their damage reflect mod. No, it's not the damage reflect mod. It's applies panic on attack, which is also a stellar mod. Um, I haven't seen it very often, just because people go Malictors
Yeah,
in multiplayer if they're gonna go with side number. But I actually do think that Sacrifice to the Abyss is it's a good op,
yeah. I mean,
even if you're
it's
getting it
100
kind of neutered.
energy.
No, I think it's the full herald now. I think at game release it was like a not full strength one, but I think it might just um be the straight up T4 now. You don't get it forever, but adding a T4 to the battlefield is worth doing.
Did I spell Herald wrong? I must have. All right.
It's yeah,
Yeah, this guy's awesome.
crazy. So I think that's just about all the tactical ones. And if we forgot some, I'm sorry, but I don't know if we have to keep talking about it.
Nah.
So let's talk the strategic ones.
Mm-hmm.
We've kind of gone adjacent to them in a lot of these discussions. There's a say about half the races and half the secret techs have access to some type of strategic summon. And whereas with the tactical summons, really the focus has been on winning a fight with the strategic summons. Excuse me. Um, it's about how does it fit into your build.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them are going to be focused more on the very strong if you're rushing going early for all the reasons we've already discussed. There are some that are always just good. Again, in multiplayer, you often end up with a lot of turns that you're not using your strategic op points. And if you have the spare energy, just being able to spawn, maybe not a trencher, but certainly like an owl or any of the most scouting units, that's
Yes.
totally worthwhile to have a unit that's expendable, fast, giving you vision, and once you start, once you get a stack or two of them out, you can merge them all up into 6 or 8 of them together, and maybe you can knock over a city and distract your opponent. So, the strategic summons tend to be best early on, but many of them just have a long tail on usefulness of it's never a bad thing to be doing, even if it's not enormously high value in the same way.
I know
Um,
deploying an owl is a thing, but it doesn't call it deploy owl. It's something else.
just look up owl.
I think it
I
has a
think it's
different
something
name.
owl.
It's I remember it's the one that doesn't. It's like
Emergency
really hard to
recon.
find.
I'm sorry. It's
Yeah,
emergency recon.
I should have written that in my notes.
Yeah. Um, these got changed in cost. Again, it was either T-Rex. I think it was T-Rex. They all generally became a little more expensive. In operation points, I think their energy cost stayed around the same. It's a little harder now to really pump units out from this,
Yeah.
unless you're dedicated to get more operation points as early as you can. Because like deploy all, I think was at 6 or 8. Um, I'm sorry, not deploy all. Emergency recon was either 6 or 8
Hmm.
points. So at the start of the game, you can only get one every 3 turns. Once you get the tech, right, and that alone is gonna take you some time.
Yeah, it's 8. It's pretty
So
expensive.
4 turns actually at the start of the game, but it can become a lot quicker later on.
I think
Um,
what I really like about the owl was what somebody mentioned yesterday. it's cheaper than the monitor station in terms of upkeep. It may have more energy initially that you have to spend, 60 versus, is it 40 for the monitor?
Something like that, 30 or 40.
Yeah, and then its upkeep is 5 compared to 4, so you can put your owl down, move it around, and it's going to cost you less energy
Yeah, and
pretty
there's other
quickly.
trade-offs there too. The monitor is invisible, the owl is not, but just the cost-effective scout summons. So deploy owl, whisper of discord,
Hmm.
um, the Promethean one. You can kind of use those guys because I think they might have 40 movement points. Let me double check that. Oh, I can't look what the plasmoid's got.
Oh no.
But many of them are just nice little cost-effective. I want a scout, or I'd want another unit or two just to fill out stacks, replace some losses or attrition. They're best early in the game, but they never lose value. So having access to one of these is a very powerful thing in multiplayer, in my opinion.
I think Plasmoid is kind of undervalued. I think Ninja was saying
I
that to me the
agree.
other day. Because this
It,
backlash ability, it just allows you to deal a lot of damage to enemies if you plant this in the right place.
a cheeky one is Promethean Vanguard.
Mm-hmm.
So Vanguard have some mods that really ramp up how good the Plasmoid is. You get interlocking armor, so you get stagger resistance. You get nanites, so you can, again, a little more armor even, and they can heal themselves. And then you toss on, purification field or thermal targeting or something.
Mm-hmm.
Plasmoid's a very good unit. It's just a really annoying little guy to kill.
Yeah, fighting them in the map is it's not fun sometimes.
Yeah. So the only downside it has is it literally can't damage flying units at all. So if you run one of those guys into any sort of scout, they would all die. But that's another reason why Vanguard has excellent summonings, because then you just bring a few owls along to handle that particular problem. So you can definitely handle a lot of cities, and you can handle a lot of just random little stacks. Anything except your opponent's probably the primary stack, and with just nothing but summon units. So uh, I I really think Plasmoid is good.
I'm curious how
Um,
you feel about emergence.
right. So Kyuko, Spawn Emergent is in a weird position that it's wildly overcosted for the unit itself, right? So it's 7 and 50. It is cheaper than kind of the baseline cost of 880 that you see with not 880. Yeah, 86, whatever.
Yeah.
It's operation point wise is what I care about. Energy, I don't so much. It's slightly cheaper than kind of the baseline cost for a lot of those scout level units. But the Emojin itself, if you can click on the unit, it doesn't have any of the scout advantages, right? It's not floating, it's not flying, it doesn't have fast movement, it doesn't have the extra vision range, so you can't use it as a scout. It sucks at it.
Mm-hmm.
It's got not even quite T1 stats, right? 30
Yeah.
HP with no defense stats is worse than a scout, most scouts, for just pure defense. Gung Spit, I can't remember. It's not repeating. It can't be.
No, no,
Gung
it's
Spit's relatively low value, so the
at
unit
least
sucks.
ranged.
It blows. But if you can evolve it, you're gonna get a free T2, and you're gonna get a damn good free T2. Either the Hidden or the Transcendent. Either one is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that just takes a lot of time and effort that in the multiplayer games I play, you can't do because you can't baby these guys. We have to do a lot of auto fights.
Yeah.
If you're doing play by email, or if you're doing single player, that you can really baby these guys, optimize their XP gain. It's very it's one of the strongest summons in the game. It just takes a long time to get there.
See, I thought you were gonna say it's awful. Don't use it ever because it's better to build the hidden or transcendence in their cities. It's gonna
I
cost you
mean,
more
it would be.
energy, some terms of
It is.
productions.
That is true again in multiplayer usually, but if your plan is really just to use all of the pathways available to you to build units, it's good. And where does this sit in the tech tree? I mean, it's pretty quick. You can be getting these guys out. It's only a T2 tech. So you'll just have to research their tier 1 mod tech and then into this guy. So you can start doing it pretty early. But I agree, it's got a short window of when you want to use it. You want to use it early enough in the game that you're getting value from not having built the units themselves in your cities, but it's not so late that the erosion is just such an active drain on anything you're trying to use it for, that you don't have something better. So yeah, it has a use, but I don't think it's a very good one in a multiplayer or competitive setting.
Cool.
And even in single player, I think I kind of, now that you said that, I agree with you. It drops off like a rock once you start, pretty much once the Marauder stacks get mods. I don't know if this is worth your time.
Yeah. So Clone Predator, I recently discovered this. I actually I haven't played too much Amazon until recently. I saw how
This
good it
got
was.
changed. So Clone Predator didn't exist until T-Rex. What used to be here was the summon a it created the animal marauder summon thing on the strategic map.
Oh, I remember that. I was looking for it actually. I
Yeah,
was like, where's that thing?
which it had extremely niche use of, you could then farm it to get animals from with the Amazon's control animal ability. But in multiplayer, not so. First off, this is way down the tech tree. This is like a T7 or T6 tech or something. But in multiplayer, you basically were saying, okay, I'm going to spend a bunch of points and energy to give my opponent free XP. Because those summoner ones, they're annoying, but they're usually not annoying enough to be a high priority. So either you put it somewhere where it's not a big deal, but if you did put it somewhere where it is a big deal, then your opponent's going to just kill it right away and get the experience from it. So Triumph killed it. They got rid of that and replaced it with Clone Predator. Clone Predator summons a T3 with a small chance a T4 animal.
You can get the worm.
Yep. Either one. It's like a 1 in 10 or something. 1 in 10, 1 in 20 shot to get the T4. But either way, this is a very different use case than with the other summons, right? I had said most of the other strategic level summons, you're using them for scouts or for rushes, and then kind of that long tail of, it's just okay to be getting those units. The Clone Predator is giving you an actually amazing unit, right? Because the T3 animals are pretty much just solid without, like, they're not balanced in the same way that the T1 and T2 animals are, where they're kind of meant to be easy things for players to kill early on. The T3s are chunky. They're scary.
Yeah.
And then you toss on the Amazon buff to them for free, right? 65 and 2. That's crazy. Plus the 10% damage buff, plus all the different Amazon mods you can put on them. This is basically a way of saying, I'm going to be producing a T3 every turn. Well, not every turn because it's 20 points, but every other turn or every third turn for the rest of the game. That's just amazing. You don't know what it is, but for anyone that's played Age of Wonders 3, it's a lot like how Archdruid played out, where as the game went on, they started transitioning into this summon-based combat. Planetfall isn't really balanced that way. You can't really get enough points to consistently have your summons be the focus, but it is unique to Amazon to be able to get these just solid units in the late game.
Yeah.
With the drawback of, you have to look at how the tech tree plays out. I've tried to do this. This was my end game plan in the the community game with the voxel.
Yeah, it just didn't go on long enough, did it?
I just couldn't get there, and in order to do that, I had to actively avoid other things that would have won me the game.
Aw.
But you can viably with Amazon, and it's something I think Amazon are one of the few that can do this. You go down your mod tree, and then flip into a unit-based build, right? Because you're going down your mod tree, and then eventually you get to restorative cloning, just at random, which gives you access to these T3 units easily. Where with any other race, if you're going down the mod tree this far, you really have pretty much given up on getting high tier units at all because of how much tech you've invested.
That's actually a really good point. I like that.
For better or for worse, right? Now, for Amazon specifically, really the advantage there is you would get Clone Predator, start cloning the Predators, and then you also then would get the mod tech just under it, which gives you Blood Fury.
Yeah, there's some really nice ones in the Amazon tree.
The only one that I think would apply is Blood Fury under Organism Stimulus. Because that needs to be heavy, and I think, well, there might be 1 or 2 exceptions, but almost all of those T3 animals are going to be heavy.
Yeah.
So you can toss that on.
I think not the Misfortune, which is so good. I love Misfortunes.
Yeah, I think Misfortune is one of those exemptions that it's not a heavy unit. I don't believe.
It's light.
And then the ones that were added was Shikard, the Thundermaw. I don't know if they're heavy either.
Yeah, you can definitely get those too. I think they'd be light.
Triumph's been pretty consistent about adding the ones that make sense as they toss more animals into the game. Rolling all that in.
Only have a few more things on the notes here.
Yeah, I don't know what time we're at. I don't have that in front of me. I don't. Do you want to address a little bit some of the like per unit stuff? Or...
maybe like in a minute, like just do it really quickly. Just say a couple things that we liked.
Sure.
Let's just go over the synthesis, reactivation, reactivate Imperial androids, and we have Celestian, Ascended Teacher.
Yep. Well, yeah, so I guess I did forget about Imperial androids. That is another one. Well, can you pull up that tech tree? Because it makes a lot more sense when you look at that tech tree of why I have the opinion about it that I do.
Oh, you want to see
that's the synthesis one, right? So reactivate Imperial android on the face of it would kind of be similar use case to Clone Predator. I think it's a lot worse though.
It gives you some tier 2s, I think, like the Emma bots or something like that.
It's a lot smaller pool, which is both good and bad, right? Because it's way more consistent what you're gonna get. But it's a pool of units that aren't quite as good. That's been changed as well. I think a little bit, or at least maybe they just clarified what you could get. But it's autonom units, E-bot units, or network links. And one of these things is not like the other.
The network link?
One of them you want way more. Oh wait, this is. Oh, I need to tell. Need to tell somebody that the tech tree is incorrect on online because system regulations is just fine. Anyways, so that helps a little bit. That does change my mind because I thought you needed an entire different tech, but the tech tree I was looking at was not accurate to what's in the game.
Okay.
The cost is way better, right? It's only 10 points instead of 20 for Clone Predator. The energy cost I'm not as worried about, right? That fixes itself. But the unit quality isn't as high, and getting 2 T2s instead of 1 T3 at that stage of the game is often not as helpful because these are strategic summons. Your plan is going to be probably to mod them in order to get full use out of them. You have to spend twice as much Cosmite. Well, not quite twice as much, but right, you have to spend more Cosmite to bring those guys up to full effectiveness as opposed to the T3s. It is really good when you're just trying to refill after losing a bunch of armies or something as quickly as possible. It is going to just give you kind of these random stacks a lot quicker of kind of odds and sods to throw out to be annoying. But it's also in synthesis where really once you get T and I, you don't want a lot else.
There it is. Yeah, that one's
Yeah.
amazing. Okay, that's fair.
So you're gonna get T and I, you probably are good with that. You're gonna want to switch then to maybe better units to put T and I on, as opposed to getting this random summon. I just don't see it as quite of high value, just by definition of the units you're getting, as you would with Clone Predator. But it is the other situational case that is a late game summon instead of an early game summon.
Okay. So let's talk Ascended Teacher quickly.
Oh,
because
right. Then
we're
there's the
over an
Ascended
hour.
Teacher and the Herald of Oblivion, both of which are technically summons.
Oh, is Herald also? Isn't that a build thing?
Herald, yes, Herald of Oblivion is also a... No, actually, I might be wrong about that. I might just be thinking of the fact that when you build it, it eats population. Yeah, never mind. I'm mistaken. The
Yeah.
Ascended Teacher is the only summon. It's a summon a Tifo unit, which is amazing. But it also is a influence summon.
Yes.
And not an energy summon, which puts a pretty big cap in how fast you can get these guys. But it just comes so late.
If you're on a larger map,
you
should have more
talk to
influence.
Tins, he tried doing an Ascended Teacher build once. I don't remember how it went, but he was actually able to make it work. Whereas with Herald of Oblivion, as the other Tifo, Secret Tech Tifo, he couldn't make it get online quick enough.
Well, they give other units in the stack Enlightenment and Resurgence, which means you don't need to use a mod enlightening your units, and if they die, then they come back. So you just need to be very careful with your teacher.
A phenomenal unit. Really, that I don't see this as much as a I don't put it in the same category as some of the other strategic summons, because what the Ascended Teacher gives you, you cannot replace by building in a city, right? So Clone Predator, to a slightly lesser extent, is the same way, but with pretty much all the other ones we've talked about, even if you can't get that exact unit, you can get something that can duplicate its effect by building, right? You can build scouts. You can build chunky T3 animals if you're Amazon. Well, not animals, but chunky T3 units if you're Amazon. You can't build something that replaces an Ascended Teacher. So really, I just see the summon for this as a case of it's a different way to build the unit that you can't just be spamming this guy out in a bunch of cities, which is hard to do anyways. Usually the Cosmite investment is going to force that regardless. I really just see this as a way of being able to make influence be the price you pay to get a teacher, as opposed to Cosmite, or as opposed to population, or as opposed to massive amounts of production or energy.
In that dev match, I think I was playing Celestian Syndicate, and my plan was to get some tier 4 Apex out there and an Ascended Teacher to just resurge them and just rampage, but it didn't
build around having 5 or 6 stack of Tifos rolling around.
I mean, it would have been pretty awesome, but it was just too long term. It wasn't quick enough.
Again, in any sort of semi-competitive multiplayer, it takes way too long to get that sort of stuff online. Getting a Ascended Teacher is doable, maybe even 2 or 3, but that's a really hard game plan if that was your game plan.
Yeah, it was a bit silly.
So yeah, I guess if we very quickly, I think we've talked, we might have missed 1 or 2 along the way. We didn't really talk about trenchers, but that again feeds into, I think Devour Xenoplague is the best rush combination in the game, because you have a strategic summon that's powerful, you have the free spawn from being Xeno, and then you also just have the massive production output of Devour for the cities you did build. So I do want to just quickly say that Summon Trencher is very powerful, even if we haven't explicitly talked about it. And it's powerful in a different way from some of the most scout summon abilities, where you're not really going to be scouting out with trenchers, Devour usually just give up on scouting entirely because they'd rather prospect. So with that discussion, again, Xenoplague also exists and Herod also exists, where all or part of their secret techness is built into some way of getting free spawn. Some of which are kind of adjacent to things we've already discussed, both from like applying this to the racial equivalents or otherwise. Xenoplague has many different ways to get their stuff aside from just a pure tactical op or a strategic op. They kind of break the math there a little bit. Herod it's his own beast where they actually have very limited ways to get drained directly from strategic or tactical operations.
There's the Doomsday. That brings
That's really
in.
the way that they're gonna go completely off to get them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their tactical summon is just a really limited use, especially if you can't manual every fight. They do have, I think, a strategic op that can directly summon drain, but I believe that's just the Doomsday T1 or something. So they're kind of different in the math of how they get those summons,
It's
and how
expensive,
they
that tier
would build
1.
around them once they have them.
It's condemned to drain, and it's like 80. No, it's 60. It used to be 80 energy. I remember because it was a bit ridiculous for T1.
It got cheaper, but the downside to this ability is that it's restricted specifically to non-mindless infantry, which there's actually not a ton of those you're gonna fight early on in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So with very quickly, having I think mostly talked about the summon operations, the summoning units. So once again, Vanguard are the all-star here. They have the engineer. Way late in the tech tree, they have the drone carrier. I think it's drone carrier, right? That's what it's called?
I thought so. I put 2 spaces in there, I think, actually. That's okay. There, we found it.
I'm not
Yep.
crazy. I've never seen anybody build this guy, but it's been buffed many times because people say it sucks. Really, the thing with not even just Vanguard period, but all these units are kind of balanced around being able to get another unit. Getting a free unit on paper is extremely powerful because you're getting 3 more actions win fights. However, many of these units have been kind of balanced or tweaked around assuming that you're getting those actions, so they can be a little bit weak on paper.
Yeah, these
like if you
drones
go
aren't
to the
great.
engineer, maybe that's a little better comparison. Engineer's been changed around a little bit over time with different patches, but it's got okay defensive stats. It's basically got a support stat line right at 40 and 2. It can't super, bang in the front lines. It can take a hit or 2, but not 3.
Yeah.
It's the support abilities it has are all right. Targeting calibration got that massive buff, but in actual play, it's surprisingly not useful to give up every other turn of a unit to give one other unit +1 range.
Yeah.
And some accuracy, but like it's just not a huge. That's a really bad action economy in general. So really, the engineer, if it didn't have that gun turret, would be awful. With the gun turret, it's okay, but the gun turret is immobile and once per battle, so it's not like there's ways to start abusing that and really ramping up its effectiveness, but like the unit has been designed around that extremely powerful ability to summon stuff in.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite units that can summon in things is the Autonon network controller. It I think because the units can be got other ways, you can like buy them through NPC factions. The things that the Autonom thing can summon in are just generally better than the turret or the drones that we were just talking about.
In general, NPC units can break a lot of this math because those are balanced around limited limited accessibility by the player.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just build those guys out either.
Yep.
So they are often tweaked a little high. Because like again, here you've got 60 and 6, which is well, no, that's okay for a Tifo, but it is also a Tifo, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why they keep buffing the drone carrier, because the drone carrier was originally balanced around, well, yeah, you can infinitely have drones on the field for forever. And it turns out that wasn't a big enough swing at the Tifo, Tifo stat line.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's other ones that are out there too. The reverse engineer, which it got tweaked around a little bit. They actually put a little more power into the construct and a little less power out of resurrecting stuff infinitely, which I think was correct. But that's another case of, like with the engineer, it's got terrible damage output unless you factor in getting value out of its summon, and then a handful of other random little utility abilities that are solid but not game breaking. Who else can summon stuff in the field?
Tactician.
The
I saw this.
tactician.
Yeah, I was like, wait. Oh yeah. I never used
That's
Shakan.
as a
Test.
T3. Yeah. I think I can't remember if
Sleeper
they've changed
agent.
it or not. One of Us All Along is okay. But again, that's T1 or T2 infantry only. So by the time you can start rolling out tacticians, not every build is going to have a lot of T1 or T2 infantry units that you're fighting against.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And
I see.
yep. And it's a full action, super long range, granted, but full action once per battle. That's another one you see in a lot of these. A lot of the unit summons are once per battle. Not all of them. And there are certainly races that have ways to get around that. Again, Vanguard being a notable example with pugs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's as much interesting discussion with these, because again, all these units are balanced around having that available. Really, the discussion that you would then start to have is, okay, to abuse that mechanic, you have to start trying to figure out ways to either make the once per battle not be once per battle, or if you're fighting against the AI and can just really cheese stuff out and last fight games out for a long time. In multiplayer, you would want these units for all the abilities of the units, not necessarily just the summon, because often the summon is not gonna make or break any given fight.
Yeah. At least this guy's got fallback. It resets
Oh,
or
I mean, yeah,
heals and press
the
advantage. That's
tactician, don't get me wrong, the
yeah.
tactician is a good unit. The engineer, a good unit. Reverse engineer, okay unit. But that's as a unit, right? It's not the one ability that's gonna drastically pull them there. Yeah, Ravenous, that's kind of an oddball example. With Devour, you're technically summoning units.
And we think that's
Um,
emergence, but we didn't test it. It would make the most sense
I
though.
believe this is one of the very few times that, well, unless you count Xenoplague, one of the very few times that you're going to be getting a strategic benefit from the tactical ability of a unit you can build. I think I followed that chain of thought correctly.
That made sense to me. The words compute.
But you're getting an emergent, which, as we also discussed in Spawn Emergent, by the time you have Ravenous rolling out, emergents are going to be not super duper high value.
Agreed.
And in the multiplayer big 18 versus 18 fights, people tend to snipe off the weaker stuff just to remove actions from the board because of how valuable actions are. So often these unit summons that are giving, by definition, kind of weaker summon units, whether it's turrets, whether it's or emergent, whether it's sleeper agents, what have you, those are really easy things to cost effectively remove, because they won't have, well, they can have mods, that's been changed, but they're easy targets to clear from the board, to just gain you some of that advantage back. So that is the other thing with these, to maybe abuse some of them, is I don't think this will do it with the emergent you get, but with most of the other unit summons, any applicable mods get carried in. So then you can start to try to look and see, okay, well, what mods do I want? So that's one of the reasons why the engineer can be okay, because you can put firearms mods and put it on the turret as well. They have their dedicated mod to give them the launcher turret, which is amazing.
Yeah.
There's some little games there you can play. Reverse engineers with the arc defense, arc retaliation.
Yes, I love this mod.
So then your constructs kind of become not, they're not suicide bombers in the same way that like the spore pods are, but expendable, easy to throw into the fray. Just they're gonna be little annoying guys once they get there. So I don't think there's any other ones to specifically talk about. You can kind of start to, as we go down this chain of thought, talking from the units, you start going into, well, how does mind control fit in? Is that like summoning a unit? But that's probably for an entirely different discussion. That's getting afield from what we'd started talking about.
Yeah, I think actually we've covered pretty much everything on my notes, and I'm really happy with this discussion. I'm sure there's a lot more that could be said. If there's anything we missed, feel free to like leave a comment below, if you're still here. But yeah, I'm really excited to hear what people have to say. I think there will be a little bit of discussion around this. Thanks for joining me here, Orange.
Yeah, no problem.
We'll see you around.